Hi, welcome back. It is weekly numerology, and this week we have an 11, master number 11. And one of the questions is, why is 11 a master number? Like, what does that actually mean? And I do speak to people and ask them sometimes, and I think they just think it's something spiritual, like a magical spiritual energy that's really great, that's kind of existing outside of them. But I do want to just say that I did make a little short about how I have learned, but also I have learned and experienced the numbers in my human experience. And that's a big part of my numerology, is how to live with them. So let's just go back to the explanation of how I experienced the 11 as a master number. So we have two ones. One of the ones, right, is you and me, just like me and my finite self, my body in this 3D earth realm, okay? And then the other one is over here. It's like the infinite, right? It's the infinite, it's the light, it's considered source. Maybe you call it God, maybe you call it the unified field. However you want to understand it, but it's an infinite source. And part of that infinite source is inside of you, meaning like, so you have that infinity inside of you. That's a part of the infinity out that is part of everything. So we have these two. Now, if we were to add them together, they'd be a 2, right? But we don't add them together, right? We keep them separate. But we do recognize that like 1 and 1 is 2, and 2 is the number of relationship. This is the relationship between you, your finite self, and the infinite self in relationship to the infinite outside of you or connected to you. And that's the relationship. So the mastery in that is that 11 likes to elevate everything. And one of the things that it elevates, or has the potential to elevate, because it's always your choice, is truth. So there's truth that you see all the time, maybe with your own limited consciousness. And I don't mean to say you, because I always include myself, because I'm learning too. I'm evolving with everybody else here, right? There's a limited perception of that's my truth. And then there's a higher truth. And sometimes that higher truth is known to you, and sometimes it's not. It can be a discovery. So how do I put this in context, right? Because the 11 is going to ask to like elevate to the highest truth, right? Maybe some people call it a spiritual truth. To me, I just want to keep it simple and like, we're just elevating to maybe the next octave of truth. And that can relate to our own infinity inside ourselves. Okay, let me give you an example. So the example is this. I went to a meeting. I go to these meetings and they're organized around a certain topic, and we all get together and we all talk about a certain topic. And each week there's a leader that comes to talk about a topic, and then we all talk about it amongst ourselves, right? Kind of like a book club, right? You go to get the book, you read the book, and then you talk about it. So we have a certain person that's supposed to come and talk about a certain topic. Well, the person that came really didn't have any knowledge or any real information about the topic. And so I was like, and that was my truth. I experienced that. And, I had to go through my little thing. I was kind of disappointed, whatever. But all that moves through pretty quickly for me these days. Didn't used to, but does now. So at the end of the meeting, a friend of mine contacted me and asked what I thought, and I gave her my truth. I said what I said. He didn't really know what was happening, but she validated that truth. If I'm using the 11 frequency, I have some choices, right? Because the highest truth is just like, I can end it there and be like, okay, you know what I mean? Live and let live. I could be like, hey, do we need to have a conversation with the person that's selecting leaders to try to get them more aligned and maybe vet people? That's a possibility. Right? And that all leads to higher truth, right? It's all like, I'm collaborating. It feels like we're not focusing on the problem. We're just like focusing on a possible solution. And that in my body feels good. Like I feel like I'm in flow. And then there's another way we could go. That way doesn't feel as good to me, because my friend could have called and I could have just started to complain. Oh, that guy was so terrible and he didn't know what he was talking about. And why did the person pick that? And like, maybe, we really need to talk to her. We really need to do all this and blah, 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 blah. That is it's not invalidating the truth, because the truth is just still there, right? But it's like, what in your opinion, and that's for you to discover, is the highest truth for you. That's why it's a master number, because sometimes we want to go down that road of complaining or doing these things, kind of creating more problems than are there, than just like, how can I see it from a higher perspective? How can I look at it almost like a bird in the sky? Like, And then they like, I'm gonna take the high road on that. So I think that makes sense to everybody. And that's why it's a master number, because it's really gonna work with you. And another thing I just wanna say is, before I close out here, is that living your highest truth is not always easy. And you don't need someone to validate it. And it's not that we don't desire validation, because I think we all do. I know I did, especially when I was younger. I just don't need it anymore. I have more trust and faith in the truth and in the higher truth. But it can be challenging sometimes. Sometimes it's challenging when you're the one holding the higher truth and no one else is. And they're all in a lower kind of, what your perception is, lower truth. Sometimes you want to try to convince them. That's not really what the master number asks. The master number asks, it asks you to live it, and by living it means that you invite other people to it. You don't need to explain it. We think we do, but you don't. This week's numerology. I will be back soon. Questions you want to share with me, any of your higher truth insights, I always love to hear it. I will be back very soon.